Coming up, we continue to take a look at next year's draft class, this time with a New Jersey homegrown talent in Dylan Harper. Does he have the skill set and ability to become a potential pure point guard at the NBA level? Also looking at Trey Johnson down the list there. We'll go ahead and dive in on all the great details coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here in the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And Doug said it at the top. I'll say it again. We get to take a look at the second Rutgers player here, already having taken a look at Ace Bailey. They'll be playing together. Dylan Harper, Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, played at Don Bosco Prep, and now stays local in Jersey to go to Rutgers. And really, we won't talk about it much, but turn around potentially the outlook of that college program, let alone what he'll do as a pro.
Oh, baby, who wouldn't want to stay in the Garden State? You know, that's where we're from. I mean, come on. Is it even a question that you're just going to go down the parkway there and just and hit up into RU and call it a career? No, I mean, obviously we talked about Ace Bailey yesterday. Dylan Harper and he are going to Rutgers this year. Something is a surprise considering the sort of like lack of pedigree around the Rutgers program. But like you said, this could be a defining season in sort of how they're able to attract a high quality, I mean, frankly, two of the best prospects that we've seen in some time in basketball, and they're going together in Rutgers. So we talked about Ace yesterday and how we thought there was, that I don't know if he would challenge Cooper Flagg in terms of just being able to, supersede him in terms of the draft order. Dylan Harper right now is a consensus number 3 pick, though, behind those two guys, and for good reason. So we'll get into his game. Another guy where probably if like the Nets landed third, you'd say to yourself, I mean, obviously Ace and Cooper Flagg are the two prizes. Could you see yourself, resetting your franchise around a guy like Dylan Harper? I think you could see it. Does not have probably the same ceiling as the two guys above, but another one who would have been first pick consensus in this previous draft easily, right? So this is just sort of where we stand with this draft.
No, it's fantastic, though, to be able to go through some of these picks. And we had mentioned it with Hugo Gonzalez. And you say, hey, if you could have had 4 or 5 draft classes spread these guys out, there are plenty of players deserving of being the number 1 overall pick. And in that regard, at least everybody, Brooklyn Nets included, should be getting an incredibly high-level talent, regardless whether you're picking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who knows how far back we'll get as we talk about Trey Johnson later in this episode as well. But as you mentioned, Dylan Harper, local New Jersey, 6'6", backcourt. They call him a combo guard. There's also some places where you can see him be as the jumbo point guard, as that's becoming the term, and also a coveted kind of commodity when it comes to the NBA level. 6'10" wingspan is also a notable attribute for him when you think about having a player that in theory, and we'll talk about his game, but I think the most intriguing thing for me when you're looking at Harper is, can you come in potentially and showcase over this next season at Rutgers that you could be a pure point guard at the NBA level? Because if so, now all these size and attributes become that much more coveted and that much more valuable. There are things in his game that suggest it's possible. Maybe chief among them also that he has pedigree as Ron Harper, one of Ron Harper's sons, and the other brothers in the NBA already.
Yeah, Ron Harper Jr. In the NBA with the Raptors. But so a couple things there. One is I love guys with pedigree. Like I love guys who come from NBA families.
Talk about this like year over year. Yeah.
If there's a coin flip on the skills, I'll take the guy whose dad was in the NBA every single time. Just because you grew up in the environment, it's not going to be overwhelming. Like you sort of understand what it means to be a pro. If you have a family of NBA players, Jonte Porter's family aside, maybe. Like there's a part where I think that like that is, I just think that means a lot, right? And it's just because you just understand it in a way that other people aren't going to. So obviously the fact that he grew up in an NBA family with Ron Harper as his dad makes a lot of sense. What you said from a basketball point, where you said combo guard. I mean, I do see him as a point guard, maybe not like in a traditional pace pushing sense, but in terms of like overall court vision and overall sort of understanding how to begin engineering and sort of putting together an offense. He's getting pretty close to being able to do that now. Like he has court vision. He draws comparisons to another guy that's in the NBA already, which we'll get to in a second. But just in terms of like how he projects as a player, the 6'6" plus the vision, plus the ability to like read and react already, like he already defaults to seeing other players on the court. High school level where the guys are way worse than him.
Right.
And I think like that is such a good sign for a guy like this. So moving to the NBA level for him, I think it will be a decently easy transition as like being able to pass first, but also be able to shoot down the line really, really well. I mean, like, so that's always like my first instinct around sort of like seeing him, like what he could become as a player.
Yeah, you mentioned it there about the pace, right? Because he's not a guy that from when you watch a little bit of the highlights, that is a burner. He's not taking the ball in transition and absolutely torching down the court. But the benefit of that, or the upside of that, if you're talking about from a pure point guard standpoint, is that he does seem to play under control, strong sense of the court, strong sense of where his teammates are, strong sense of how to navigate into the lane, adjust based on where defenses are, and then just make the right basketball read. And even when you say, dropping it off to at the high school level, teammates that are clearly not on the same level as you, having that footprint, I think, is also always nice to see, especially if you're going to go, let alone to the NBA, but go to Rutgers and play with Ace Bailey. So, I mean, there's going to be a world here where we go into this upcoming season at the college level and see how Dylan Harper helps Ace Bailey have the best version of, his season at Rutgers as well. So I agree with you. I think you wonder about the pure athleticism when you talk about these prospects. Ace Bailey, when we mention him, it just jumps off the page when you watch him on tape. I don't think there's any one area for Dylan Harper that jumps off the page for you when you watch him. But it's the sum of his parts, offensively especially, that I think can tell you he can do it at that next level. Not problem, but as it often is with college guys, there's some things within his shooting that he's going to have to work on in order to make himself a higher level contributor, I'll say, because he doesn't have the same ups, doesn't have the same ability to play above the rim the way some players would despite his size. So this is mostly like a controlled, high IQ and smart basketball playing potential point guard who can navigate the NBA because he's using every level of his skill set.
Yeah, there's another NBA player now that he's drawn comparisons to, and it makes a lot of sense. It's like not a one-for-one corollary between these two guys, but you can see where these two guys would overlap. We'll get to that, who that player is, and whether we think that's a good comparison. We'll get to that here in just 1 second. First, I'll tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, with all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home those huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about one Dylan Harper, New Jersey product, going to Rutgers, and then also playing in New Jersey's backyard. That's right, Brooklyn, New York. That's New Jersey's backyard. That probably isn't going to play well with some of the fan base. When we talk about NBA comparisons, who's the name that was brought up? And while it's not a perfect fit, you can understand some of the correlations.
Yeah, so the guy that I've heard mentioned, and it's easy to see, I actually thought of this too. One of it's for silly reasons, and one of it's for just for sort of functional reasons, but it's Jalen Brunson. So there's a couple reasons that these two guys overlap a lot. One, he's lefty, and that shouldn't draw you comparison to these lefty guys, but it does stand out when these guys do come around because there's so few of them. Brunson, obviously Harden is lefty, although I don't think I would draw comparisons between Harden and Harper just based on the lefty alone. I do have a pet theory though about the lefty thing that I'm going to throw out there real quick. I've always thought that lefties have an advantage in basketball. There's so few of them, but I wish there was more, because I just think so many guys have just spent their 20,000 hours guarding righties. And the second you get to the lefties, and that's why these guys get fouled all the time, like Brunson and Harden, because they seek it out, but also you're just so used to guarding a guy's right hand and not them going up with the left hand that it gets weird. So that's I've never seen a deep dive analysis on that. It's always been my pet theory that lefties have an advantage because of that on the defensive end. There's other comps too here, but what do you think of that? What do you think of that pet theory?
As a left-hander, I feel like it's given me a great advantage in the podcasting world. People often think that I'm going to reach for the mic with my right, but then I go with my left, and then all of a sudden they're thrown off, and I start making brilliant points, and
I
everyone's
mean, if you're
really
lefty
happy.
in real life, you're just a weirdo. That's
Oh,
the like, but basketball, it's an advantage.
basketball standpoint. You meant athletically speaking. I see. Well, in that case, maybe the proof is in the podcast pudding as far as
Sorry to break it
left-handers
to you. I have
being
seen studies.
weirdos.
Lefty equals huge weirdo. That science is solved. No,
I'll look
I
up
was,
some quotes
I
here
was
for the end of
speaking
the
only
episode
about
to
a
bounce
basketball part.
myself
No,
back.
look,
The
real quick,
no, but I
Brunson.
do.
The other
Hold on
part
now.
about Brunson here is
Yeah.
that Brunson comes from an NBA pedigree family. His
Mhm.
dad was in the NBA. They don't neither their athleticism jumps off the page. I mean, Harper's clearly a lot bigger, so I don't think that part like plays. But the part where he's slower, more methodical, has been pass first at times, has good court vision, just can like stop and sort of navigate a defense really well. And then the jumper, like they actually kind of do look a little similar with the lefty piece. That's
Mhm.
where they draw the comparison. So it was like the pedigree plus the overall sort of style of game. I'm not sure Harper has like the same, like maybe overall leadership stuff, but that he's still so young. So I hate to make a decision on that one really, really early. But that's a comp. You will see this comp more mostly because Brunson got so good
Yeah.
over the last couple of years, and I think you'll see the
Right.
comp more and more.
I think, and the other thing is too the physical play style of Jalen Brunson. You think about Harper again, it goes back to well, he may not be the fastest player on the court, especially when it comes into navigating around the paint. And it's always something you'll watch now at the college level, because when you're playing at high school, the bodies around you are a little bit smaller, but his body control, going up towards the basket, being able to finish, whether it's fully getting above the rim at times, which he's shown capable of doing, but also just needing to be able to get your shot off, use your body to shield away defenders, and maybe to your point, a little bit of that benefit of being left-handed and having some guys have a more difficult time against you. There's just a lot of those kind of things that even, okay, comp to Jalen Brunson, fantastic, but standalone, it is key things that he is doing well already that he can continue to expand when he gets to Rutgers. The other things then would be, I mean, we'll flip quickly just to the defensive side, obviously, because if you're talking about a player, if we're going to say we think he's capable of playing pure point guard at the NBA level, which we do, then having a 6'6" body and a 6'10" frame and 220 pounds walking in the door to start your NBA career and having enough versatility to switch defensively and be able to read defenses and react, that is immensely valuable in today's NBA. You don't have to look farther than the Brooklyn Nets and all of the backcourt players that they've had. And at times when we talk about, well, this player will get picked on, even Cam Thomas isn't the biggest guy in the world, even if he has some physicality to him, the defensive skill set aside, you need players like this that are capable of taking on the more difficult backcourt assignment on a possession over possession basis. So if Dylan Harper shows that as he goes to Rutgers on the defensive end, then you're talking about the two-way that you really need if you want to have a pure point guard leading your roster.
Yeah, the defense, and that, I'm glad you got into that, because the defense already definitely starts to play here as a backcourt defender. And what you mostly want to see too, like you said, is that at this level, especially the high school level, you just want to see the effort. Like if you can see effort, I mean, defense, especially the guard position, is a skill, but defense across all positions is effort based. Like if you've seen guys who are undersized be able to just not be total zeros defensively, mostly because they try, right? There's guys that just don't try and fight over everything and work really hard. And then they sort of get picked on. They're going to get picked on anyway, the smaller guards, but it happens a little less when teams know that you're actually have quick hands and get into people's bodies and try to get into their dribble and their handle and stuff like that. Harper, I don't think actually even has that problem because his size and wingspan means he's going to be able to defend up positions. And when you talk about combo guard style, if you're a one that can guard up to three, like that's a really good, I mean, that's a really, really nice advantage because you're not going to get picked on in the pick and roll. You're not going to get targeted there. You're already sort of out of that mix maybe because of who you're guarding. It's harder to get you cross-matched onto somebody because it's just not going to matter as much. And if you watch tape on him, he's, I mean, really trying on defense. Has really good instincts, has good ball hawking instincts, has good find your man instincts where like plays are broken down and he doesn't just kind of sit around and wait to see what happens. He's actually tracking back to open shooters, tracking to where guys are, trying to figure that stuff out. And if you're doing that at Don Bosco, where you're already light years ahead from most guys in terms of athleticism and overall ball play, and you could just probably take some possessions off because you're the point guard too, right? And the fact that you're not doing that and you're really, really dialed in, that is like a professional attitude at a high school level. And it's just not something you see with every single guy, because again, it's not a knock. These guys are like generational talents. You're so good, especially against this competition, that it usually just comes easy. Eventually it gets hard. Like eventually you reach a level where it gets hard. But the fact that he's, I would call it dialed in on that end already, that's just something that you just don't see with every single guy. And it's really, really encouraging.
It does take something when you're playing against guys, no offense, that will never sniff college basketball or will certainly never sniff the NBA level of basketball. It takes something to be focused, to dialed in on still working on the skill sets that are going to matter way more as you get higher and higher up the skill set chain, going to Rutgers, going to college, going to the pros, right? So those are also good features to have. The only thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to ask you if you noticed this. He gets towards the basket really well. We talk about the shooting. Yes, he can shoot from the outside. Did you feel like, because we said this about other players, I'm trying to remember, I was one of the Brooklyn Nets who not nearly the same pedigree, now plays for the Kings, and I won't be able to remember his name. Maybe it'll come up in Doug's head. He got traded away a couple of years ago. He had a long shot motion. I don't think that Dylan Harper has a long shot motion, but he doesn't have the highest release point, I would say, on his perimeter shots. It looks like there's a little bit of like, it's not even a hitch. It's just a little bit of a slow release. And I wondered about that maybe being the thing that I'll dial in on at Rutgers and start to see how that looks, just as you get some bigger players on the court with you, some faster defenders on the court, making sure that his release is quick enough to get off those outside looks if he's going to play off ball in certain possessions.
Yeah, I actually did see someone. I watched another breakdown of his game through another. I watched a bunch of these, so I actually can't remember exactly. And I feel bad when this happens because I can't remember exactly who said this, but that his hand was mispositioned on the ball, like it was too far to the outside, and
right.
But it was like it was a really easy fix. Like it was a fix that, not easy, but it was a very fixable mechanics thing.
Right.
It just meant like repositioning the ball like an inch toward the inside, so it's not so much on the outside, because when it's too much on the outside, it takes you longer to get the ball up, right? If you have it all the way positioned sort of underneath the ball with balance on your offhand, then it's a quick release. But I did see someone put that in there. I'm blanking on who. I feel really bad about this. Anyway, I did see that mentioned as like a possible thing to like look out for, but it was also far from the end of the world. And I don't know what I do not know what player you were referring to. With the former Nets guy with the long.
I know. Never remember him. They traded him. He played for Providence. Everyone will be in the comments talking about second round pick for the Nets a few years ago. He played a bit, then he got bent, basically buried, and then they traded him out to Sacramento. I can't.
Yuta Watanabe.
What? Good enough.
Got it.
I don't know why that got.
Move on.
I don't know why that absolutely got.
Nothing about that fits. Nothing about the clues you gave fit. But what I'm gonna go with Yuta Watanabe as my guy.
Let's coming up here in a second. Let's also take a look as we continue down the top 10 list here. Trey Johnson is another name that is starting to get a little bit more traction and talked about as a player who could really explode when he gets to the next level. We'll see how his game breaks down and whether or not he'd be a valuable pick for the Brooklyn Nets should the lottery balls fall the wrong way. We'll dive into that coming up next. All right, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode, obviously talking about all the key lottery picks that are available for the Brooklyn Nets in next year's draft class. We've gone through all of those key top players: Cooper, Flagg, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper now, who I think, again, as you said at the top, Doug, any one of these guys, you could talk about being the number one pick in a different draft class. While it's a little bit different than Cooper, Flagg, and Ace Bailey, mostly because I think just sometimes size also really matters. The bigger player you are and the more fluid you are with your basketball skill set, it obviously offers more versatility at the NBA level. But if you're talking about putting a large point guard in the backcourt with an incredible wingspan and this skill set, there are not a lot of guys. And by the way, not to sidetrack here, go through the rest of this draft class. As deep as it may be, there are not a ton of point guard prospects in this draft class overall for the Brooklyn Nets. So if it came to pass, they were picking more in the 3 spot than the 1 spot. There's a value maybe to targeting a player like Dylan Harper in that case. Trey Johnson, on the other hand, is another player that currently, we'll just go by Tankathon right now. They have him listed in the 7th spot, but he's already moved a bit further up the board than originally. Also 6'6", playing in the backcourt, considered more of an off-ball guard, but only 184 pounds. So, I mean, just as we do the comparison chart here, it's a guy that is giving nearly 40 pounds to Dylan Harper, relatively speaking. And I think that's probably one of the number one things we'll talk about is just frame and whether or not you can put on enough to be able to play at a high level when you're sub 200 going into your college year.
Yeah, right. So this is the kind of guy that it makes sense where you get out of like the surefire zone and you get into the would have been, top 3 easily in this year's draft, but I'm not sure he would have been a surefire number 1, right? Could have been, but only because this previous draft was kind of a mess. And maybe he just would have been. But this is the guy where with Trey Johnson, you get a little bit out of the like I said, surefire thing with Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey. And it's like, you just can't at this point, you put him on the NBA court and let's see what happens kind of guy. Dylan Harper, really not too far behind that. We'll talk about VJ. I think actually VJ Edgecombe, like not too far away from that either. No, Lone Traore, little different for me, but I can see why people kind of like, we might end up flip-flopping them, whatever. Yeah. With Trey Johnson, super athletic, has like scoring touch and the scoring piece probably is already going to play, but there's question marks. There's a reason why he's here, right? He has he has an elite skill. Like he can definitely score the basketball.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's like at a crazy high generational level. And I actually would be a little worried as a top 3 pick, let's say. Yeah. I would have a few more question marks around what he is. Awesome player. Can't wait to watch him play at Texas. Probably going to smoke a lot of these games and going to have like some real ceiling games for sure. There's just like these other little caveats that you have to throw in there, which I hate doing because he's like really, really good. But I think at this point, we're in comparison mode with the other guys, right? I think like that's where we are in terms of top 5, like the top 3, top 5. And so I'm only going comparison with the rest of this draft class, which unfortunately he's part of, like not his fault, but that's where he is.
Yeah. And I do wonder about like, with him specifically, I mean, you mentioned the scoring skill set. You can go back and look at guys that scored an incredible level in college and still translate successfully to the pros, but just not at the same elite level. The other thing I would talk about, and I like Trey Johnson, by the way, because it's easy to watch. He's incredibly fun to watch on the offensive end of the court. But if you talk about the frame as well, we said this with other players here on this list. Ace Bailey saying, okay, does he have the ability to fill out? We talk about on the back end there when we were discussing some of the bigger front court players too. I don't know if his frame is built to add, right? So what is the ceiling in terms of how big he'll be able to get at the next level and whether or not beyond scoring on the offensive end, it's like defensively now you have the length, but now you're going to be talking about, and this isn't saying you can't do it, positional basketball IQ, right? Like being able to get to the spot ahead of guys, because we've seen a number of players who maybe have the ability, but physically just can't hold up to some of the switching matchups that you're going to get onto. And then even offensively, I mean, this is maybe a weird comp to make, but most recently when we watched Mikal Bridges on the offensive end of the floor, now Trey Johnson has a better, footprint for offensive skill set. But when you don't have the ability to use physicality sometimes to overcome the defensive matchup, you have to rely on just your pure skill set. And I wonder how much we may see that, not until he gets to the NBA level, but how much will we see unless he can really put on mass. Sometimes it's just easy for bigger guys to keep you in front of them and to keep him get away, from getting to some of his spots on the court. But that's like also a long way off in terms of getting a sample on that. You're not going to see that much of a problem with that at the college level over the next year.
Yeah, well, because you can he shoots the hell out of the ball. So like he's a great shooter, one of the best shooters in the draft, like for sure, right? So like he's that's gonna take him a long way. And I agree with you that in terms of Bridges, like he has more of a scoring pedigree already than Bridges had for sure. Although Bridges like clearly turned that on at like a slightly older age, which is really sometimes a little rare to see, but also pretty awesome. With Trey, again, I think the scoring is gonna pretty much get there like right away. So I really wouldn't worry about that. It's the main reason he's so high up in the draft class. He's got the size too. I think the body will fill out and the frame will fill out a little bit also. I don't think he like projects as like these like classically skinny guys, even though he's pretty slight right now. Yeah. But he's not going to get up to like LeBron levels of mass or whatever. Like he's not built like that for sure. But he's not KD either, right? He's got something a little bit more on the bone. Where I would get a little concerned with Johnson is like a really high pick is, and I hate to box score watch with these guys because these levels are so different. And he went to Link, which is a super high level academy, obviously maybe the best in the country. But when I see guys who are like, even at these lower levels are like score only, because if you look at his stats at Link, he was like 15 points and then 3 assists, 3 rebounds. Now, again, box scores can be sort of meaningless in these things because they just, you can succumb to whatever, who the other guys are on the team, the style, whatever. Those other numbers for a 6'6" guy with athleticism were so low to me that it gets me like a little worried around, hey, what else is happening when you don't have the ball, right? And we know what happens when you do have the ball, you score. When you don't have the ball is when these other numbers like don't really come around, and I always get a little worried when I see those discrepancies on guys. And I've been wrong because I was like, oh, this is why I didn't want anyone to draft the Nets to draft G.G. Jackson, and I was like so wrong. But I don't know. Does that make sense? Like when you see those numbers, I'm like, what else is happening here?
Well, and over on we had Jonathan Wasserman had offered up some of these comps for the NBA level, and the comp for Trey Johnson that he used was Cam Thomas. Now, different in terms of build, and the type of player, but the scoring is electric. It's elite. But the question is the rest of the game, right? And we've seen this firsthand. Nets fans would say, well, it's because the team has done a horrible job getting Thomas onto the court and developing those other secondary attributes. We talk a lot about.
That's not the whole thing, though. I sorry to interrupt you. I'm just like one sentence. That's not. It's a little bit the team. Other guys get assists and rebounds. So it's not all the team when you look at this stuff.
And that's what I mean. So it is the both and. You can say, the Nets did a bad job maybe getting him out there sooner, developing these attributes. The other part is, what are you most identified as? The guys we're talking about at the top of the draft, we're talking about players who have the all-around game, who offer versatility on both ends of the floor, right? Who've already demonstrated those skill sets. So, when you hear a comp like that, in some ways you go, hey, we've seen what Cam Thomas has done offensively at the NBA level. That's certainly a talent you'd be interested in. The other side of it would be Cam Thomas, though he definitely would have been taken earlier in the draft if you went back and redrafted his class, I think. He was taken later in the first round. And these are the differences that I think that you're fighting with when you talk about guys in the lottery, in the top 10. It's, hey, are we going to be able to translate beyond just being that? And it's not a knock, but there are a ton of pure scorers at the NBA level that don't offer defensive value, don't offer versatility, don't offer offensive, capabilities to set up teammates and all the other things we want. They're still great NBA players, but they're not changers of the trajectory of your team, right? And we may see that firsthand this year. And I'm not even trying to now knock Cam Thomas, but we may see Cam Thomas be absolutely electric this season. And the Nets will not win a lot of basketball games as he goes off. So I think that's probably the splitting hairs of it here in some of these players. 7th overall, 8th overall on the big board right now. But Trey Johnson is a guy that would have to show other things in this year at college at Texas in order to go, now coming into the draft, we can continue to get excited about him. I still like him, but it's just different between some of the other guys we talk about at the top.
And by the way, scoring is not the only category. We'll get out of here, but the scoring is not the only category to talk about this way. It goes the other way too. Like, it's where guys like Oscar Thompson, let's say, why is he the number 1 pick? It's because you're worried about the shooting, right? You're not worried about the athleticism or the length or like the overall mentality or all this other stuff, the speed, the hops. But in general, like, is he going to be able to really, really hit the highest end upside if he can't shoot? Well, that's why you go 5th. Or, that's why you go there in the draft and not number 1, because you're waiting. So it's not just like this is a scoring only discussion. It's like this for all these guys. It's like there's usually a hole somewhere. Sometimes the hole is massive and you have to see if you can climb out of it. But I just didn't want this to be like a scoring only thing. Like we see this with all different guys at all different pedigrees. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. Really fun to start. We're going to get out of here. Talk about all these guys. We're going to get more into draft stuff, later this week and into next week too. This is just where this is where the Nets are going. This is going to be a draft kind of season for the Brooklyn Nets. In the meantime, make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
I have this one little saying: when things get too heavy, just call me helium, the lightest known gas to man. That is a little known left-hander named Jimi Hendrix.
One of the all-time great poets. We're back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.